Hello, it's Brad Laurie, or Blockchain Brad, and today I'm speaking with a fellow Aussie, someone well respected in the crypto space for many years actually. His name is Ben Fairbank. He is the CEO of RedFox Labs, which is a startup that many people have been talking about of late, with a lot of news coming, and he's here specifically to address all the questions, all of the information that's come forth about RedFox Labs, and also the things that they are doing to develop. So Ben, mate, thank you very much for being here on the channel. This is entirely free, and it's all about trying to allow you to have a voice to let us know about what you're doing.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, very, very happy to be here as always, and nice to talk to a fellow Aussie.
For sure, mate. And, once again, whenever we do catch up, we can have a chin wag for quite a while before. And it's been interesting to hear just as a catch up. But now it's time to roll up the sleeves and find out what you are doing in leading as a CEO for RedFox Labs, Benny. Now, I want to start with, a bit of a recap, because a lot of people may not know what you do as the CEO, and you're not just the CEO of RedFox Labs as well. So give us a bit of a rundown on the situation and the scenario now.
Yeah, so as you know, we've been going for a few months now. The market conditions are very, very interesting and trying. So it's an interesting battle to try and build a team, bring people on, and try and get them focused and get them to really buy into your vision. It's been great for us because we've got a very, very clear vision. We've spent the majority of the last few months really getting people up to speed, building an internal culture. So we've spent all of our time and effort on that internal culture, because we believe that'll flow out, and that's been really, really successful so far. We do interesting stuff like every 2 weeks we swap books. We all read the same book. We go through that together. We share our experiences. We put them into the workplace. But we're really honing in on the projects that we're building out, and we're looking at developing partnerships through our network that has been from outside of the crypto sphere. And that's been really, really interesting. And as you know, on the flip side, I'm also the GM of Komodo, and Komodo is the technology platform that we use to build out on. So there's been developments there. So what we've been doing is we've been really focusing, as I say, on the internal, the culture, the vision, the way we're going, and the way where we're headed, and then building these solid foundations. But we've been trying to build foundations with a lot of these traditional companies to be able to sort of help with the mass adoption side of things.
Got it. And Benny, having known you for some time, you're situated in that Southeast Asian belt. You literally moved so that you could, try and capture some of that market share, some of that attention, some of the, technological innovation that's happening in that region. But I want to talk about the terminology with regard to what RedFox Labs is. Website explains you're a blockchain venture builder. Can you just really make it clear for us exactly what it means to be an incubator or an accelerator, and what fundamentally is your focus, and also your point of value?
Yeah, sure. So we've been very different, I guess, to a lot of the incubators and accelerators, because what we do is we come up with a business concept much the same as Rocket would do. We look at predominantly Chinese-based businesses that have been very successful, that offer a service that is in demand but lacking in Southeast Asia. So obviously our home base is in Vietnam. So what we then do is go about designing that concept, working out how we would implement it. And we're quite different, because what we do is we say, how would blockchain enhance the existing models of the business? How can we make it more secure? How can we make it cheaper? How can we make it easier to do business? But our extra, or the further layer that we go, is we try and make it so that the end users don't actually know they're using cryptocurrency or actually dealing with blockchain technology at all. So what we're trying to do is swap out what they would use. So say, for example, it's a Grab or an Uber with something that's an equivalent service, and it would work in the exact same fashion, but in the background, blockchain is powering it. And the companies that we start up underneath RedFox, most of them will not have any type of forward-facing coin. So people will not have to learn how to use a wallet, how to trade on an exchange. We don't have to go through the rigmarole of building up another audience and some sort of Telegram groups for all of these, as far as this, in the same way to get that audience to get listed on these exchanges. I mean, the whole experience is a bit dodgy, to be honest. So it's good for us to just sort of build on the tech and build real companies that have real end users that have revenue coming in. And I don't understand why, but it seems to still be a pretty novel concept in the space. So We're focused on customers and revenue.
Right, exactly, mate. And you have that business background, and it's really interesting to have this kind of candid chat about how blockchain can actually be economically viable for mainstream businesses, that particularly those that don't even know about the existence of blockchain or haven't really tapped into its potential. But I want to move back to the conversation of that accelerator and incubator, because one of the unusual things or less common things in your architecture is that you are tokenized, in the sense that the token fuels the entire incubation and acceleration model. So in that sense, talk us through the need for this, if indeed there is one, for this utility token to really provide for a means in which you can drive the entire ecosystem forward, because it is something that is not yet really known, and not really understood.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we're kind of fortunate to have is on Komodo's tech, you can now actually take a part of your supply, which we're doing right now. You can actually burn those. So you can melt those into another coin. So we have the opportunity to be able to have further transactions going through our RedFox main chain, and we can actually burn or melt coins and produce new coins. Now, for example, if we were to build another business like the one that we're about to do, we can actually have that new coin underneath, not seen, and working in the background. And as I say, there's no secondary market for it. No one purchases it. No one needs to know how to use it. No one needs to learn about a wallet. But what happens is RedFox then becomes deflationary, if you will, in the sense that we're actually burning the supply as for each new company that we're actually creating. We have a new coins, and therefore the coin supply diminishes. But people can pay for the services that we provide. People can pay contractual services that we do, or consulting or anything like that. They can use our coin to receive a discount. And any of the ecosystems, like the one that we're about to create, they will be able to use their existing RedFox coin to be able to achieve a discount in the business structures that we build.
Right, and that's really clear, because you've built in the utility through the incentivization, the discounts, the use of this as essentially some sort of token model that we've seen in mainstream emerge when we see companies trying to incentivize. So it's not something new in that sense. But when you couple that with this model of the deflationary, where you're essentially reducing supply through a burn model, as you mentioned with the melt, how does that fit in? Because one of the things about you, Benny, you've always been very forward. You're very direct about the realities of the questions of the terminological sort of scenarios we see emerge when we see utility, commodity, utility, security. It gets really confusing for us when we start to see different effects and different strategies used within the tokenized token economic model.
I think, to be honest with you, 99% of these projects don't need a coin there, and to be honest, I think a lot of these models are created to force on people a need to use that coin or that token. And to be honest, it's a bit sickening when you look behind the scenes and you have a look at what the links people will go to try and force a coin down your throat that you don't actually need, that you don't get any actual benefit out of having or using. So for us, as I say, we've had several models that we've now decided on and we're going to build out. And the question that we keep getting asked is, how come you don't have a brand new coin for that you do another ICO or an IEO for, and all the rest of it? And I think anyone who's been through an ICO or an IEO, and a lot of the investors as well, would say, geez, there's not another IEO and not another ICO. And the thing is, for the purpose of doing that for no reason, or for the sake of just having some sort of sale, it's kind of, like I say, it's a bit sickening, really. They're not necessarily needed. So we would rather have that coin as an underlying, use the blockchain for security, or use it as technology that's underneath. We don't want to force people to learn how to have 500 wallets and 900 coins just for the sake of, well, we'll wait till the next bull run and everyone's going to get rich off that coin. So we're actually, we burn some of the supply that we already have of our main coin, and that's the only coin that people are going to be able to buy, sell, trade, and use. So the idea of that is not to build 10 startups and have 10 new coins, because the rigmarole you've got to go through to get listed on the exchange, and then the amount of money that goes on, and what happens behind the scenes is quite frightening. And I think that anyone who's prepared to launch 10 coins, for example, if they were a venture builder, is I don't think they have the best intentions of the public in mind, to be honest.
And you know what? It's a great moment when we start to see more of this transparency and discussion about some of the things that you've certainly been privy to as you've been building some of this tech for the future and trying to emerge as something of an incubator for innovative technology that's trying to, you know, essentially make gains in the mainstream, trying to showcase what blockchain can do. Now, moving back to the incentivization, you know, that's quite interesting because if mainstream can pick the benefits of this up, you know, for their own ends, then they're going to see, you know, the value of discounts, the value of mass adoption through the simplicity of the token itself designed for incentivization. So when it comes to utility, I wanted to ask you about that term. Do you think we've hit the nail on the head when we say utility token? Like, is it really that accurate when we talk about it?
I don't think that most of the tokens do have much of a utility case at all. Like I say, I think a lot of these coins, the models or the way the companies are set up, the reason that a lot of the companies are doomed to failure is because they're not actually structured in a way that makes logical business sense. And I mean, if you look at the reverse, so I've come from a traditional and conventional legacy model background.
Mm-hmm.
And if I go back and talk to those companies, and I've got good doorways into the senior people, and I can say, have you thought about using blockchain? And they say, at this stage, we won't. And I say, why? And they say it's too risky because we've got adequate systems. Yes, they could always do with a bit of enhancing and all the rest of it, but the stability of the technology is not yet strong enough. It's too much of a commercial risk for us to swap out existing systems for new systems that may actually cause a problem that we don't actually currently have to provide a benefit that hasn't necessarily been proven to its full extent yet. So the other thing is that you've got a lot of bad actors out there that are trying to tell these businesses and teach these commercial businesses that it can do a lot more than it can. It can wake you up in the morning, make you bacon and eggs, and get you off the day.
Right.
The blockchain has huge potential and has some great functionality, but in this particular point in time, we're very raw, we're very early. So we thought it was better to build a traditional business model, to build businesses that can compete against legacy models. We understand how the tech works, so we can actually bring that tech in new businesses and build it on that. It's much more of a risk for these existing businesses that are already out there to integrate tech in its new and raw stages, which is why these types of loyalty and reward points and all these types of things operate on the sides of businesses or as a value add. It's less of a risk for people to implement those into the
right.
major.
And mate, it makes a lot more sense then, because if we've seen traditional enterprises also have those side note incentivized or tokenized models, you know, or you know, some sort of point system, if you will, that has some sort of monetary value, then really we're not reinventing the concept, but we're utilizing new technology to be more efficient and more effective. Yeah,
for sure. And I think the thing is that there's, you know, people will say you're hard pressed to come up with 5 or 6. If you talk about people that are anti-blockchain and anti-crypto, they'll say you're hard pressed to come up with 5 or 6 really, really strong use cases at this stage with the level of technology and development to really displace entire systems. But when you look at loyalty and rewards, for example, when you've got sheer volume, and depending where you read, 48 to 62% of all of these programs get hacked through account takeover attacks. People understand that there's huge money to be made by funneling out points, putting them into accumulating those points into one account and selling them for cash. It's a massive fraud issue. There's a lot of bad actors in that space as well, and there's a lot of it's easy prey for hackers. So it's an actual use case where blockchain can actually already provide a really good alternative right now and an extra layer of security. But again, where I think people are going wrong is you've either got a traditional model with points or you've got a blockchain model with a coin, and someone has to work out a way to force the coin that makes you buy the coin, that makes you buy more of the coin. And then the thing is, if you try and implement that in Southeast Asia, it's illegal for you to use a coin in place of something that would be
a currency,
the native currency. So if I buy an Amazon gift voucher with dong in Vietnam, the Vietnamese dong, I'm not allowed to use a coin to buy that. So people have to like come up with creative ways to make these models work. You don't need to. All you need to do is say it's a point system like you used to, like you use on an everyday basis, but underneath of it, don't worry, underneath of it is blockchain working hard to make sure that you're protected and secured and making sure that those points are not open to account takeover attacks. You don't need to have a new coin called loyalty point coin that you have to then go out and raise $10 million for and try and force that down people's throat. It's just unnecessary.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, as you said. And it also brings to the fore that new terminology and that new wording of digital asset, because in that context, it really becomes clear that the asset here is the reward incentivization point opportunity that is enabled through that underlying sort of hidden blockchain mechanism that many people don't need to know exists. It's just a way that, you know, we enjoy as sort of tech-centric speakers in the space. But that is also synergized and juxtaposed with the revenue that you can generate. And that's, you know, a model in itself that you've created. So talk us through that, because you making money for your centralized business model is distinct to the purpose of that token. Yeah,
so like the way we see it is if you've got an underlying token that nobody sees and a coin that nobody sees, effectively, if that's not traded outside or in any secondary markets, the value of that coin is stable, right? So I can say it's 1 cent, it's worth 1 cent. So the thing is that I can have, you take Swag Bucks, for example. Swag Bucks is a very well-known unicorn reward and loyalty point company in the States. And that'll say 1,000 points is like $10, and you can go on and you can buy a $10 Amazon gift card. It's very, very simple, easy for people to understand. Being from a strong customer experience background, I don't want to have to learn something new. If you want to show me something that's cool and it's better and it's faster and it's stronger and it's more efficient or whatever, I'll have a look at it. But if I have to go out and learn something and learn how to use a coin and learn how to get a wallet, learn how to do all of this stuff, I'm not interested. It's too hard, and I don't have time for that stuff. So ultimately speaking, the way that we would do it is underneath you would have the coin. So you would have your points, just like in a database. You'd see those points, you'd go onto your marketplace, you'd do the transaction. The transaction would be then settled in fiat, and the coins would then return to in the supplier. We don't need to have this top level coin that we sell on multiple levels. Now, how we make money is we would be rewarding people for their time. So an advertiser could come in and say, I want to pay you $1,000 to advertise my product. And we would say $200 of that goes back to rewarding the people that are watching the ads, trialing the game, playing the game, giving feedback, doing a survey. They can then take those points into a marketplace and they can purchase what they like. And then it's very easy to get partnerships with big unicorn. And
that's where this gets interesting, because if the fundamental asset is about, you know, really espousing this kind of reward system for Southeast Asia just at the start, surely there are major players that are already starting to see, you know, the potential and experiment with this. And I read in a tweet you put out in a publication, there's some really big user bases out there and big partnerships that you're starting to forge. So talk us through that, Benny, from some of the big names and right the way through, even in the roadmap for other pipeline partnerships that are coming. Just give us a real understanding of the real deal, the real mainstream potential of this, not all this other BS that we hear from other projects.
Sure. Yeah, so the thing is that the partnership that we've just done is with a company called MyMedia, and most people will say I've never heard of them. And you probably wouldn't have, because they're based in Myanmar. They have 11 million followers across 6 channels, and they do stuff like tech and sport and fashion and food. And they've got a lot of people through a Facebook model go on, follow these people. They provide their own content platform and they produce quality stuff that's high engagement. Some of their videos get 500,000 views. So companies like Grab, Huawei pay these guys to produce content on their behalf because they know what the local audiences want, and it makes them very engaged, obviously. So the hardest part of anything, now crypto, it's hard enough to try and get people to accept it, to utilize it, to take it on, to download some sort of a wallet. It's very, very hard to get the adoption. The second part that makes it very hard is how do you get the users? Everybody's competing for the same space. Everybody's competing for the same followers.
Mm-hmm.
If we take an engaged user base and we do a partnership and a 50-50 business with another company who said, we've got 11 million followers already, they're engaged, they're highly engaged, and we say, we can help you create this platform that allows these people to be rewarded for their time and effort, that they can come back and provide feedback, because we're very, from the customer experience background, we're very heavily into data and analytics, and we understand that we can actually find out what people think of these products, how often they're likely to use them. And the good part about it is, you go onto YouTube or something, you have to wait 6 or 7 seconds for these crap ads to finish before you can skip it, right? This is the platform that would allow people to choose to go in. They can watch targeted content that they're interested in, provide feedback, earn points that can then be redeemed for whatever it is that they choose in the marketplace. As a result of having 11 million followers already, it's not hard to get big partnerships with local players and players throughout the region to come in and say, if you've already got companies like Grab and companies like Huawei and these big brands locally using their platform to market their goods and services, this is a very good head start, because we already have a very engaged audience and user base. And also it is easier to get these mainstream partnerships. So we're not starting from scratch. We are starting from there because they've got an audience, but then this rolls very smoothly into Vietnam, also into Philippines and areas where these types of models are very successful.
Right. Well, that's a big deal, because you know the whole space. You've lived in the Southeast Asian region for some time. But given that the focus is this incentivization structure, for the inherent value of the token, I want to try and understand, if this moves forward, and you really have significant adoption because of the real user bases and the real reach of these entities in the mainstream. If you couple that with the strategy you're taking to reduce essentially that supply through the deflationary approach, do you ever worry that you're going to have enough tokens if you really build out, your ecosystem for the future?
Great question. Well, the good thing about the melt process in Komodo's technology is I can take a couple of coins and turn them into millions of coins. So I can melt into a new supply and a new chain. So this allows me to be able to. There's no problems with that whatsoever. But also because, as you were talking about the inherent value, the RedFox chain would obviously have much more transactions and volumes, and then subsequent chains built in that ecosystem. So that is very, very good for the token holders of the RedFox ecosystem. But as I said, we could take 100 RedFox coins, and we can actually use those to create an entire supply for a company that sits underneath of its surface level fee.
Right. So you're not worried too much about that. But what about with regard to liquidity? Because that, not just with RedFox Labs, but everyone right now is screaming for more of it, because we're in a really tight market. We're in a really restricted market. I had a look on CoinMarketCap just to get a bit of understanding of how the action, what kind of action is on the chain. It seems that it is really tight, and I wanted to ask you, are you concerned at all, Benny, about the brands of exchanges? Because you often talk about the focus is the tech and the focus is the business.
Yeah, well, I think that most of the projects that have started, and anyone who started in the last year would also understand that in the beginning you've got a bit of a choice. And I'm being kind here. I think
it sounds like
in the beginning, ICOs were a lot of the ICOs, the retail investors were the ones that they were taking the money from. A lot of the IEOs, the exchanges, taking money from the projects. You've got a choice in the beginning, and that is you can forfeit the majority of your raise and your funds and your efforts on getting listed and then paying exorbitant amount of fees for market makers, and then you've got your obviously lockups for money that you're paying to these exchanges as well, and you've got penalties if you don't get enough volumes through. So the thing is that you've really got a choice. You either go down that route and you try and roll the dice and you hope that the coin becomes worth enough that you can then take some funds back and then build out what you want to build out. So that's the whole marketing angle, versus the whole, I'm going to build, but I'm going to make sure that we've got enough exchange listings to be liquid enough. But I think it's a conscious decision that people have to make is how much money are you going to pump into making this coin liquid in a market where there isn't a huge amount of liquidity, And how,
I just wanted to jump in there because you raised a good point about raising the question of how much to put in. It suggests also a bit of a manufacturing approach or a manufactured approach to garner support and bolster, interest in that particular startup. So, are you concerned at all that there's a bit of an artificial sort of engineering going on with a lot of these initially, with the IEO, with the ICO, whichever it be, simply because of the necessity of attention and the value of attention?
100%, and I can say it openly and honestly, and I've said it before, IEOs are 100% for PR. They'll get you the public relations and get your message out there, but anyone who thinks that they can rely just on the IEO component of the raise to raise enough funds to be profitable and to go ahead, that's why a lot of them only try and raise 300,000 or 400,000. Most of those funds will be then used for market making services, or to buy back your own coins, or to in a lock away. There's plenty of different ways that it obviously works. So I think that I think it concerns the hell out of me, and I think
it's fascinating we're talking about this because you did an IEO. You literally know from that experience of having gone through it as a CEO. So you're literally saying, for those who haven't yet done this, Benny, in the CEO situation, and considering it.
Raise, go out, talk to VCs, make sure that you've got your funding secured before you go down the IEO route. The IEO route, as we know, for the majority of the exchanges, they have questionable volumes and liquidity. It's a rat race. There's 251 exchanges in Australia alone. It's a mass saturation of exchanges. A lot of them use APIs into other exchanges. It's like APIs into APIs into APIs, trying to get liquidity and volume and doubling up. The thing is that, being honest, if a project comes to me now and says, look, I want to do an IEO, I'd say raise your money first.
So you're not reliant on the start?
Yeah. If you're reliant on the IEO part of the raise, you'll fail. You have to have done some sort of a private raise, and you have to have gone and
okay. So what about the future, Benny? Are there any other alternatives you foresee that really position or really enable some of these startups to not struggle, with the requisites, the top-down requisites often imposed by other parties, whether they be, the exchanges or VCs or whomever? Are there more egalitarian or more just ways to start in crypto?
Yeah, I think honestly speaking, and I've copped a little bit of criticism for it before. If you speak the truth in this space, you will cop criticism, and that's just the way it is.
Absolutely,
that's just the way it goes. So you can smile and pretend everything's the way it is, but when you get to move around through the circles and you go from advocates right through to every component that you would deal with through the cycle of raising and running projects, there's a lot of shadiness and a lot of
there's a lot of bullshit in this space, and a lot of
but it's hard for legitimate projects as well, because if you're a legitimate project and you're trying to do the right thing, you'll cop it from people that are investing, because they'll say, I want more liquidity and I want more this and I want to
it's part of the problem though, Benny, because in this day and age, there's been a propensity in the past with the bull run for things to do very well, and often there's not necessarily improvability, or there's no true tech backing for some of them. So has that been a problem because it's possibly permeated into subsequent narratives, 2019 for example, where not everyone's looking for the tech?
I think the IEOs was kind of like a new way to dress up something very old and try and rebadge it and try and reposition it and try and sell it for something else. But ultimately speaking, there's a lot of good projects out there that will struggle because of the fact that they don't they fall victim to a lot of what goes on. So then you've got your good Samaritans that will go out there and sort of say, I'm taking on the system and I'm going to beat the system and all the rest of it. And then you've got different ways you can handle that, and you can approach that, or you can go out and do what we've done and sort of say, let's just try and build stuff that people actually want to use and get revenue coming in, and build revenue streams and products that are actually provide value. And let's work with legacy businesses to say your model is can be improved and the tech's still young and early enough. It's still early, but it's able to provide you some substantial benefits in your current business models. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's a bit of a sellout because we all want decentralisation and we want to change the system. I want to change the system as much as anybody. I've worked in the centralised system my whole life, and I think I've worked in disruptive tech my whole life. And even though I was from the centralised side of the planet and the universe, I want to shake the hell out of things, and I want to do that. But there's the smart way to do it, and there's the right way to do it. But you've got to build stuff that people want to use. And I think that when I'm still having conversations with people I used to work with years ago and still remain in contact with, they say, when are people going to start taking crypto seriously? And I said, when crypto people start taking it seriously.
Right. And do you think also in that context, sorry to interrupt, but this relates to what you're saying, Benny, is that do you think that the whole narrative or that polarisation of centralisation and decentralisation is a little overcooked, in the sense that, is there value in this decentralised parties? Because clearly, if we're talking about SMEs, if we're talking about business, if we're talking about the uptake and adoption, we're not just talking about people, we're talking about businesses. So surely there's a valid position for them to be existent centralised bodies that are utilising new technology.
Oh, for sure. And I think, to be honest, if we want to get towards adoption, it's going to have to be those guys that start adopting first, right? Because no matter how romantic the notion sounds, is that you're not going to have some sort of completely decentralised tech and decentralised model come out and then start to compete and beat Amazon or whatever overnight. I mean, that's just not going to happen, right? I mean, we're going to have to go through. We have to be able to go through the whole testing this at the types of levels of demand. I mean, having 1,300 users on some of these top dApps on Ethereum or whatever is not actually, it's not stress testing these. There's lots of bugs, there's lots of issues, there's lots of things that they can't take on the same scale, some of these proven legacy business models in the traditional world. So we're still a ways away from that. We've got to be able to show people we're serious, and we've got to start building stuff out that actually does provide value. And again, the RedFox model and way is to build replicate a business model shamelessly copy and replicate exactly what a very successful unicorn company does, and then use the tech to provide a differentiation point and to make it better, faster, and stronger. And if we can do that, we stand a chance to be able to be taken seriously, and we can start moving towards more rapid adoption. But we have to start saying we're going to not give in to these shenanigans that go on in the wild, wild west. Yep. And on that, one last point. There's a lot of companies that were very successful over the last 40 years who were decentralized in the sense that they had different departments that functioned like separate companies that didn't have to answer to the mothership, and they were very decentralized in their structure and their model. There is very, very, very good synergies between the tech and those types of models that have been made very famous in the traditional markets and world. We can come together, we can put those two things together and still have a very disruptive, very decentralized technology that's mass adopted.
Right. Well, given that you are sort of approaching this as essentially that accelerator incubator as a service model, that's really important, because in that sense, it's bringing the best out of blockchain. But in that sense, you arguably are agnostic by core fundamental design, because what underpins you, yes, is Komodo. It's utilizing the technology, your experience there. But the reality is it's not, because it's not just Komodo that can be done. You could literally supplant that with another blockchain. So yes. I want to find out two things from you. Yep. Tell us a bit more about the potential or the plan, if there is one, to integrate other potential chains that may be more scalable, may have better throughput, I don't know. But also, can you give us a bit of proof about this adoption? Beyond just telling us the plan, give us some evidence of it actually happening.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, first of all, in relation to Komodo, I got involved in that because I saw that this was the most polished end-to-end. Now, you might say polished, how many products do they have and how many users do they have and all the rest of it. As far as what it can do, it is quite mind-blowing as far as all of the different functionality that it does have. Now, the criticism has always been that a normal end user can't come along and just pick it up, plug it in, and away they go. But we're getting there through developing documents and all the rest of it. So it's becoming easier and easier to use. And there's a lot of this move towards push button and I hate the term, but grandma friendly sort of way of going about things. I get asked all the time, why don't you go along to a platform that's got higher user numbers and adoption?
Well, it's a fair question, and I wanted to ask you too because I wanted to know if there was any subjectivity sort of injected into your decision to really stick with Komodo.
I'm pretty much, I'm one of those guys that if I worked for a particular telco when I was a young guy, I worked for Telstra when I was in Australia, I don't use any other telephone provider after that. I mean, obviously went into some foreign companies and I came back in, but I'm very loyal. I'm very much a person who takes a lot of time to decide on which I think is the best type of tech or the best product or the best service. And unless something fundamentally changes, I'd stick with that. And the thing is that I think that Komodo provides the best opportunities. It's got extremely high transactions. It's safe. It's very innovative. So I get asked all the time. It would be, there'll be other chains that would pay you guys to come across. We've been offered money to come across to another chain and to build out the same type of model on there. We're happy for other people to take our model and copy what we do and replicate our model. And we wish the best of success, because the thing is, I want there to be a red fox, a yellow fox, a blue fox, whatever the hell people want to build. It's all about adoption, and Komodo stands for trying to get mass adoption. And I believe that the value system and the structure behind it, the reason I stick with it is because throughout all of these markets, everyone's tried to sell out in one way or another. And Komodo's been very true to, we don't charge anything, we make it accessible to everybody, we make it easy for people to adopt. So honestly, I don't see a better alternative.
Okay.
Now.
Well, it's a tough call because obviously you have a background and an interest in Komodo, but I'm hearing what you're saying. But I did want to ask you this. If we start to see empirical proof, beyond that association you have with Komodo, whereby it's evidenced literally on the blockchain that there are more performant ecosystems and layer one solutions to really facilitate your incubation strategy, would you, in fact, in that scenario, start to consider expanding the potential of your incubation as service model so that you can really start to showcase what the token itself can do as an incentivized structure, if it can be, connected with something more performant, more effective, more efficient?
Yep, I like these questions. You always ask cutting and pretty deep questions, and I like that. I'll tell you a little lesson I learned, and that was when I worked at Grab. They only have 7 nations in Southeast Asia, and everyone always said to them, "Why don't you go outside? There's America, there's Europe, there's all these places you can go." And they said the well is so deep in Asia that we've only scratched the surface. If we untap the potential, we can dig really, really deep, and there's no need for us to ever venture outside of Southeast Asia. There's enough for us to feast on here forever. There's enough technology in Komodo for us to be able to build out more models than I can build out in my lifetime that are already able to be successful based on that technology set. I don't need to chase rainbows or pots of gold. There's enough on the table right now for me to be able to say I can categorically stick to Komodo and only build out on Komodo. And I know for a fact that, we've got a lot of suppliers and people we work with in Komodo that offer services for Qtum or Stellar or other chains. We won't do that. We are categorically loyal to Komodo because of the fact that we know that the tech will do what we need.
Makes a lot of sense, Benny, but obviously, from my position, the word loyal scares me. But let's talk about and use the car as an analogy, because I think as Aussies, this is appropriate. Now, let's say, we liken the Komodo platform to the Daimler, or the Benz engine, or maybe not that one, but one that came pretty soon after. Let's say, Bitcoin's the very first. But, essentially, it was one of the very first functional engines. It works extremely well. It's efficient. But what happens in this scenario where you start to see, other people in the world tweaking that engine, building upon that, not necessarily suggesting making it better, but are you precluding the potential of the tech? If you are so beholden to Komodo, if you are, so determined to make it work because it does all the things, or is it the other way around where we are overselling, throughput and finality when things just, if they work, they work?
Yeah, for sure. It's a good analogy. And I think the thing is that I understand exactly what you're saying. And the thing is, if we're successful at doing what we're doing from the RedFox side, we are the red hat to Komodo being the, to being the Linux. And if we can actually bring in for ecosystem development and all the rest of it. It's good enough for us to be able to build major scale companies out on at the moment. So ultimately speaking, if we're not able to bring in that adoption and we're not able to build self-sufficient companies that sit on top of that technology, then ultimately speaking, it wouldn't matter where we went across, we'd fail. I mean, our model should stack up, and the tech we know will stack up already. So the fact is, if we just switched or flitted to somewhere else, we'd just be chasing money, to be honest.
Right. It's a really interesting, way of looking at it. So clearly there is this onus of responsibility for both parties to do well, and it's also a mutually beneficial sort of relationship, and you're very reliant on each other's success. Now, let's move across the other part of that question we were talking about at the beginning, which is the proof. Now, it's clear Komodo has that, very sort of hermetic and intractable connection with your ecosystem, that is RedFox Labs. But now where's the proof that both of these entities are working properly in mainstream scenarios to evidence more productive outcomes?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the thing is that, the long and the short answer of that, I could say no. I mean, obviously we're at the point where we're trying to, Komodo, but let's be honest, doesn't have a project yet that has gained mass adoption or.
But at least you're honest about that, and that.
I mean, I'm not lie to you, but you can Google it and you can see for yourself. I'm not the type of person to beat around the bush and say stuff that's not true.
Well, a lot of others do. A lot of people do the opposite, though, Benny. That's why it's refreshing, just to tell us straight that we're not quite there yet in this nascent period.
No, we're not there. And the thing is that I think, and I don't think people yet realise the significance of it, but us signing a partnership with My Media and doing a joint venture with them for a company that already has 11 million followers and a huge engagement base, that's the first step towards the mass adoption, not only for RedFox but also for Komodo as well, because these are real people. They're actual real people that are already engaged and going to these sites anyway. So if we can reward them for doing that, it's a much easier sell in the use case than going out and saying, hey, I've got some relatively shoddy product that I've built on the end of some blockchain technology and I want people to come across and use it, and it's better than what you're currently using when it's clearly not. So I'd rather just say to people, you're already going somewhere, you're already doing something. How about getting some payment for it in a way that you're familiar with interacting with, and in a system that flows with what you're used to.
Right.
It's a much easier sell, all right? I'm not trying to reinvent.
No, I totally understand. And if we use the terminology or that phrase of stacked sats, we can almost sort of superimpose your model and utilize your token in that conceptual sort of notion of stacking some sort of token of value, because rather than it be the sats or rather it be the Bitcoin narrative when we talk about those who are rewarded for making purchases, as we see now with third-party agencies and facilities doing that. In your instance, it's about rewarding those participants in your token, in that incubator. So it's really the same concept, but really building out the potential in Southeast Asia where there is already a strong support, a strong community. So is the location also imperative for the success of RedFox Labs, given that, you've already shown that you've made this partnership and there's more in the pipeline, surely? Is the geography so relevant right now?
Yeah, it's the fastest growing region for not only tech adoption, but it's got the most room for growth. I mean, 43% of the region is part of the digital economy, and in Vietnam, only 25%, Philippines, 21%. I mean, you've got a very disengaged group of people to the digital economies. You've got 104 million people that are aged between 25 and 34, and you've got just as many coming through in the next age bracket. They're tech thirsty. You've got some countries with the highest rates of new millionaires per capita in the world. You've got emerging middle class structures. You've got Myanmar going from not even having a mobile phone to straight onto data and content, and skipping 5 stages of the evolution process of technology adoption. So we are 100% in the right place at the right time, or we wouldn't have made this move. But ultimately speaking, I mean, going back to price and point and value and all the rest of it, I'll say one thing for sure and certain: at this particular point in time, there's no guarantees that anything that we do will subject the coin to increase value or cause the price to go up. We know damn well that these markets are quite often controlled by the people that are moving the markets, as opposed to anything else. And the thing is that the value of these coins are not tied to what the actual companies are doing or revenue structures or streams, and there's a massive misalignment. So if you want to be honest, you could bring out something that was amazing and the coin price could go down because it's whatever people decide and whatever the markets dictate. But obviously we're going to be putting our best foot forward to try and make sure that the technology and the projects that we build are mass adopted, and we're in it for the right reasons, and we're going to do things the right way, and we're trying as best we can, and as best we can, not to bow down to this pressure of getting involved with these bad actors, because it's a slippery slope, and
and mate, sure, mate, and it's a huge challenge as well, because if you're trying to do something of value and you're up against a brick wall when it comes to the crypto casino, when it comes to having to almost work around the collusion that is literally almost unbearable at times, because right now you're combating the narrative and the networks and the branding that seems to be almost paramount to the adoption factor and also the real factor of this being implemented in the real world. So what's your view? How would you colour the potential of this, given that the whole landscape, and from good to bad actors to good? Are you confident that you can make it through with the model that you've got, despite all of this bullshit that's happening?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, you need to have 1.5 feet on the in the real world side, as far as real customers, real revenue, real product, real use case, and you've got to have as little in the whole crypto funny money space as you possibly can, because of the fact that you really have to have a solid use case, because there's nowhere to hide down the track when you don't have revenue streams and you don't have customers, you don't have a product that actually works and is in demand. So if you're building something for the sake of building something, and you just want to be like everybody else and have the millionth version of the same thing out there, and you hope that your marketing or a sexy girl or a ridiculous giveaway or something is going to make your product fly in the long term, it's just not going to work. So to be honest, I think we would be looked and frowned upon in the beginning, and people will sort of say, well, hang on, what are you doing? We have absolutely our investors' best interests at heart, and we are 100% making sure that this thing works and it goes the right way. But I must admit, it takes its toll on you sometimes when you do hear people saying, you should be doing more of the same dodgy stuff that everybody else does, because that way we'd be flying and we'd be on a rocket to the moon and Lambo and all this crap. And I think to myself, well, you could do all that, or you could actually just build something out that's sustainable, that works, and we get to sleep at night with a good conscience, and we know we've done the right thing. So you can't please everybody. You've got to spend a little time trying to please the bad actors, and you've got to try and spend the most amount of time as you can on with the good people. And we're lucky. We're slowly weeding out the bad people that are in our circles or around us, and we're doing things the right way, and we're proud of what we're doing. And then that's testament that a real world company with lots of actual followers and users are prepared to do business with us. And if you have a look at the types of companies that we're flying to meet and talking to now, these are real respectable companies.
Well, Benny, you hit the nail on the head. You said it yourself. You're flying around, you're going to meet and greet these companies. We actually don't know, mate. So give us a bit more information on that. Yeah,
sure. So a lot of the stuff that we go and talk to people about, this is the part that people won't understand as well. A lot of the companies that you do meet that are real world and they're legitimate and bona fide, you can't talk about their partnerships because these people actually have proper structure and process in place and make you sign NDAs, and companies that actually are prepared to try and potentially work with you or implement technology or something like that. I don't want their competitors to know. In this young emerging crypto space, everybody goes out and says, I had a cup of coffee with Warren Buffett. So
yeah, it's ridiculous.
I know. So the thing is that people might say, well, hang on, be a bit more transparent. I think I've proven a million times over the years that I'm probably too transparent, but we talk about the things that we can talk about, and we try not to talk about the things that we're not allowed to, especially jeopardize relationships. But like, for example, people could have said, how come you didn't talk about my media? How come you didn't let us know that there was a partnership coming with, like, they don't get created overnight. You didn't just click your fingers and that happened. How did this come about? we work our asses off and we do it the right way and we do it behind the scenes and we don't talk about it until we're in a situation where we think we've got legs.
Right, and Benny, I wanted to ask you in that situation, because aligned with what you're saying, if we see superficial announcements, we've seen that from all the way from academics, from prominent universities being essentially used by startups, for branding, or prominent figures in the space, whomever it is. Often it's a means to inflate price for the short term. But in the instance of this strategy, where you're trying to implement real, effective, sustained growth in your ecosystem, do you feel that there's a dearth of this? There's not enough of this strategy to make sure that people can trust the real deal? And by saying this, obviously trying to partner with real companies, that's also fundamental for trust. But how far do they go in speaking about your relationship and your partnership? Because I've noticed through my work is that it doesn't always play out where both sides release the information in the media.
Sure. I mean, our side, you can go and check the announcements yesterday. They went out at the exact same time and it was coordinated like real professional growing up people would do. So we both went out at the same time. But the thing is, I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot of, like when Komodo announced that it had its Amazon and it had its advanced technology partnership, everybody went, yeah, anyone can get an Amazon partnership. You can just go onto the website and fill out your details and you've got a partnership. It kind of takes the shine away, because an advanced technology partnership was the first one at that level that Amazon had given away, and there was a rigorous code audit and there was lots of crap that had to be gone through. But if that company doesn't come out and make the announcement as well, a lot of people say, well, hang on. And you can say, well, you can go on the website and you can see that it's there and it happens. But you're right, there's not enough coordinated from both sides, and that does make you kind of frown and think to yourself, is this actually real?
Yeah.
And none of these partnership announcements actually mean diddly squat until such time as you've got customers using your products. And, we're a long way away. We've gone out and announced and said, yeah, there's 11 million followers. There is. And yes, these guys have got an engaged audience. And yes, they're a real business that makes money and all the rest of it. And they are. But the thing is, there's a long way to go from that to implementing the marketplace, to having engaged users and using your product and having your services and revenue streams and money coming in. There's a lot of stuff that can happen between those times.
Right.
And when you're building new companies, you've got a perpetual race model. You need to go out and say, right, now we need money for land grab, and we need to buy the audience, and we need to make sure that we've got marketing money and we've got all of this stuff in the real world. So I think a lot of them are superficial to pump the price, and I think a lot of people are getting a little bit smarter, but I think we've still got a huge amount of immaturity in the way that this...
It's really interesting you say that too, because the cohort for the users, consumers and speculators is, as you know, that 20 to 30 to 40, predominantly male, speculator worldwide. Now, in the context of trading, do you think that that's also potentially part of the risks or the cancer for projects like yourselves, who clearly want to be a long-term startup and move into a real deal company that flourishes for the future and enable startups or mainstream companies to capitalize on the benefits of blockchain? Is it concerning that the trading itself sort of suggests more of that transient and speculative position, where people are looking more at how they can capitalize on something? And I ask you that in the context of also not taking the tech seriously, where, for the likes of Dogecoin, for example, they don't care if there's enough trade volume, if there's enough people, on board with a narrative that comes through, they'll trade that for, a better position.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think, and this would probably offend some people, but I think traders in this space, if you come from traditional trading backgrounds and all the rest of it, it's extremely different trading in this space because of the fact that there's low liquidity and there's low market caps on a lot of these coins, and the fluctuations can be massive with just a small amount of dollars one way or another. I think, to be honest, it's there's not a lot of real trading going on, and I see some of these trading experts post their charts and all the rest of it, and they've got their fundamentals down pat, they've got their TA down pat, but the thing is that these market moves and the manipulation that goes on sits well outside of people's ability to be able to predict the market movements.
I think that's very well said. I mean, the fact that, you know, this can happen overnight too, there can be really unusual, anomalous behavior that can only be explained by manipulation sometimes. So how on earth can people make the claim that these kinds of volatile moves are predictable?
I think anyone day trading at the moment that says that they're continually making money is lying through their teeth. I mean, this is anyone who's traded for more than a year or two in traditional markets would know that that's impossible. So, yeah, you might be able to get a win here and there, but as they say in traditional markets, your portfolio is like a bar of soap, and the more you touch it, the smaller it gets. You need to just try and find a couple of companies that you think, or projects that you think are going to be successful in their endeavours to be legitimate.
Well, mate, we could talk for hours on the trade.
Yeah, sure.
Let's pull it back to RedFox Labs. Now, obviously the pipeline, there's so much happening beyond Myanmar. Give us a bit of a rundown and a recap on, you know, to end the interview, where this is going, the roadmap, the trajectory, the plan forward, so we can really see that, you know, you aren't just talking, but you're really telling how this is all going to unfold most likely into the real world.
Yeah, sure. I think until projects have actually got runs on the board, I don't think everything that is said by them can be taken with a grain of salt. And a lot of projects have good intentions but can't execute for whatever reason. I think for us, to be honest, we will flip a lot of our time and effort and energy now into this this new partnership and joint venture with because it has a real audience and a really engaged audience. And one thing the bear market's taught us is that taught all projects, when I say us, I mean everyone, is that revenue streams are extremely important. You need to have revenue coming in so that you can survive. Most people are relying on or trying to limp over the line until the next bull run so that they can sell their stashes and continue to work and move on. So I think, to be honest, you can say how you're going to prove that any of this is real or any of this is true or that you're doing any of this. I think the most important thing is this is, I think, for us is a big win. Getting this partnership for us, it's a huge win, and it's a big win for them as well. I think the Komodo's tech. So if you want to try and join dots and put the clues together, Komodo's tech's proven to work, and it will do a lot more than what we're trying to do with it in this type of a partnership. This company's real. You can go and research them and see that they are real. There just has to be a couple of dots joined now, which is building that portal in the marketplace, which is not brain surgery. How successful it is completely dependent on the way we roll that out. But there's not too much imagination that has to be used to join the two dots for that together. Now, if you would then want to say, okay, what about future projects that are more ambitious, where you're having to try and win an audience from scratch? I would say, yeah, we've made it fairly clear that we have a few projects on the board that we really want to build out next. But this is our focus right now. So I would say anything that we're talking about in the future, let us prove ourselves by doing this one first, and show that we're able to tie that all together and win people's trust and respect. And then we're able to really sort of talk and have people listen to what we're trying to say about next. And I know that might sound like a very unorthodox answer, because people are going to be coming back to you and saying, then we're going to take over this world and then this world and then this world. And it's all well and good to be ambitious, but there's a fine line between ambition and delusion.
Right, and also you're being transparent and you're trying to produce an answer based on realism, based on the reality that you just don't know exactly what's going to play out. But right now, what you're saying is you're employing a head-down, bum-up strategy, doing the work, proving that the value is in these pilot projects, these pilot partnerships and alliances you're forging, and you're literally signing. So on that note, there's obviously NDAs lined up. You're not telling us everything that's coming forward since our announcement, but clearly what I really have learned today talking to you, to recap, is that you have a model where you're utilising the experience that you have, the role you've had before in Komodo, and also your respect for the technology to link with an incubator program, then to move that into an actionable plan integrating with mainstream businesses and pull them all together to really prove that adoption can be possible. That's the quest. That's your challenge right now. But can you do it? That's what we really want to see. We want to see that of all quality startups, because if you don't, then what the bloody hell are we all here for?
Mate, I'm telling you, if we've got an audience this size and we've got the type of tech that JL and the team have put together, realistically, there's not many factors that could cause it to fail, especially if we've got a team with the track record that we do have. So ultimately speaking, funding is always the thing that you need to be able to grow and give these things oxygen. And these huge companies need continual oxygen to come in and market and to attract new audiences and new users in. Having 11 million people is obviously a very good head start, but down the track we're going to have to be going through normal equity raises like the Series A and Series B and the traditional path to grow and rapidly expand in the Philippines and Vietnam and all the rest of it. So by no means, even if we get it launched and off the ground and we do really well in Myanmar, it's kind of like shooting fish in a barrel because we already have the audience. The real test comes and the acid test comes when we go into a market where we don't have the audience and we're relying on the reputation from another market across. So there's going to be, we have to prove ourselves 10 times over, and the proof will be in the pudding for our ability to be able to do that. But we'll go through immediately, now that we've got this partnership in place and all the rest of it, into a raise model for equity side for the new venture and try it so we can actually do that land grab. But there'll be no ICO, there'll be no IEO, there'll be no new coin on the market. We're doing things the right way. So we hope that translates, and we hope that people identify and see that. And I think that my transparency might actually frighten a few people off or scare a few people off.
It's going to, Benny. That's the reality, because we've seen that play out every single time. But we need to really clarify this right now, is that whether or not you move into an equity position or not, the reality is that the token itself was never designed to be an equity, token in any way, not designed to be that security. So the point to make here is, can they synergize? Can they work in concert with each other to support each other despite you moving into an equity position?
Yeah, we're smart enough to know that we don't want to reinvent the wheel and create, as I said, 10 different coins and all the rest of it that are tradable and have to go through getting their own following and listings. And I don't want to go through this rigmarole all the time. So the thing is that we want to leverage the main chain of RedFox, of RedFox, as much as we can, and have as much transaction volume coming through that, and the demand therefore for the actual RedFox coin, and knowing that it's actually getting smaller and smaller in quantity and supply as time goes on, we're burning for the creation of new chains. I think it's let's just say that no one knows for sure and certain what will happen in the future and how it will be regarded, but you couldn't possibly, with what we've got, work it in a way that gives it a better chance.
Right. Well, one of the things that's challenging it is volume in itself. You already mentioned this, but we need to just address this as a criticism to crypto more generally. Is that the current scenario we face now is very, very concerning and limited volume, and also very limited outside investment coming in. The inflow of support. Are you concerned at all right now, Benny, about the realities we're facing?
I mean, I've got two choices. I can either buy volume and make it look like we're heaps more popular than we are, otherwise, or I can just try and continually catch the bullets and defend that this is what a project really looks like when they make it. And then the second part is we're actually going out and trying to do the raise on the equity side for the new ventures that we build through traditional means, and targeting much more mainstream VCs or investors that want to get into blockchain with a mitigated risk, as opposed to trying to chase these VCs around that are predominantly focused on the coin side of things, because they play the same game. And I think a lot of those VCs are saying that they're in a much better position than they actually are, and they're not investing, they don't have a lot of money. So being 100% honest, and doesn't go for all of them, but being 100% honest, we're moving away from that and trying to go into the real, to the conventional
model.
Cash.
And what do you say, Benny, to those with the pitchforks out, literally, and the daggers, when they're saying, well, we're not invited to the equity show, we're not invited to those privileged, positions and seats, when, they've been there from the beginning as supporters of the ecosystem, as those who've also supported the utility model itself. Do you think that there's, going to be some, concerns raised about that?
No, because we have some very clever ways and ideas that we can actually make sure that we always want to make sure that we
so inclusivity isn't on your day sheet. It's in a part of it.
And Komodo, if you actually want to know the answers to what is potentially possible, Komodo's brand new releases and through the Antara and all the rest of it gives you some very strong indicators of how we could potentially utilise. Our goal is to look after our early investors. We don't, we can't have got this, our start without them, so we're not the type of people that just sort of say, oh, we're finished with that.
Well, I'm hearing some hints in there that you can't tell me, but essentially your philosophy is, and your ethos is to look after those that really gave you the best shot from the beginning. Make sure that they aren't forgotten.
100%, and we want the people that are with us for the long term. I mean, it's obviously good to get traders in to try and to do the quick flips and all the rest of it. I understand that's part of trading, but ultimately speaking, we're much more interested in the people that are going to be with us for the long term and who want to come in and contribute and provide some value to the ecosystem.
Absolutely, mate. Well, I couldn't have said that last part better. So thank you very much, Ben Fairbank. You are the CEO of RedFox Labs. You have all that experience behind you, as an very important part of the Komodo ecosystem as well as the GM there. Mate, I really do wish you the very best. And the reason is because the amount of transparency you presented this evening has been really substantial. It's been, refreshing because we don't get to talk like this very often with many people. You're telling us exactly how it is. The real test now is the challenge of adoption. Especially in this crypto climate, it's very convoluted, it's very complex, very, challenging because we don't exactly see clear waters anytime soon, but you're giving it a crack, mate, and I wish you all the very best as you start to really prove to us that it is possible. It's more than plausible, but it's doable.
Thank you, mate. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, mate. Good luck.